All right, guys. I'm back again. Guard So Shy here. And today I'm bringing a video from Stephen A. Smith, well-renowned individual, entertainment, sports commentator for ESPN. And he's going to be giving his perspective and what's going on with this Diddy situation, right? The indictment, as we all know, the legal case, right? And he's going to be going over it with an attorney, right? And Ryan Smith will be giving his legal perspective, his legal analysis on what should or could be expected from this Diddy case and the indictment. And there's a whole lot more going on that I'm not even going to talk about on this segment, right? On this show. But what I definitely want to do is let Stephen A. Smith talk about his perspective and we can get things going. So without further ado, let's roll the clip. Here we go.
Let me get started right now, rather, because it's necessary. We're going to start with the news that shook up the entertainment industry this week, the arrest and detainment of music mogul Sean P. Diddy Combs. On Tuesday, the federal government, more specifically the Southern District of New York, unsealed a 14-page document charging Combs with racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, and coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. If convicted on any or all of the charges, P. Diddy could be spending the rest of his life in federal prison. He's currently locked up in the same federal jail that once housed R. Kelly during his trial. Combs appeared in court Tuesday and pleaded not guilty to all of the charges. However, the judge denied his bail, which means this week may very well be his last as a free man. Here's the bottom line. The story's not going away. I'm just reading some of the comments, y'all, and I just want y'all to know, I keep telling y'all the biggest story in all of this, my personal opinion, and this is just an opinion. I'm deducing points and facts here and there. Yes, he's a big enough name to go after with these charges that have been leveled against him. No doubt about it. Federal charges of racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, and coercion, transportation to engage in prostitution, etc. Those are very serious charges. And he's a big enough name. He's worth over $400 million. He's a public figure. Very high profile. Yes, that's a big enough name. I don't believe all of this is happening because it's just Sean P. Diddy Combs thereafter. I believe thereafter others as well. And just like I learned from the Mission Impossible, the first one, when those guys that were chasing Ethan Hunt, a.k.a. Tom Cruise, was saying, this is not complicated. You find somebody's soft spot and you squeeze. You squeeze Sean P. Diddy Combs, knowing he's a public figure, knowing the connections that he had, knowing that he wasn't in this alone, assuming they're right with the charges and allegations that they've leveled against him, to get others. You went after Jeffrey Epstein. You went after Harvey Weinstein. Who else are you after? You're trying to get everybody. And that's what I think this is about. And I'm just reading from some of these stories because I think it's important to point this out. When you highlight and you talk about some of the charges that have been leveled against him and you see some of the stuff that's being said about him, look at this right here. Former Danity Kane singer Aubrey O'Day writes, I never thought I would see this day, she told TMZ. We all buried this inside of us in order to be able to keep going. And not just me, but victims you don't even know yet. We're all processing what that type of vindication can actually feel like now. Every conversation I've had with victims last night has been beyond moving on all levels. That was Aubrey O'Day. You know 50 Cent was going to make sure his voice was heard. Clowning P. Diddy. Taunting him, basically, because he's long taunted P. Diddy for years. over the harrowing allegations against him. And what does he say here? This is yesterday, 50 Cent. Here I am keeping good company with the Drew Barrymore TV show. And I don't have 1,000 bottles of lube at the house. 50 Cent was referencing the over 1,000 bottles of baby oil and personal lubricants for the freak-offs that the indictment revealed were allegedly found during the raid of Diddy's homes in Los Angeles and Miami back in March. Of course, Foxy Brown had something to say. Shit's about to really get crazy. And obviously, the Breakfast Clubs, the one and only Charlamagne the God, because remember, this show was carried on Revolt TV. That was once owned by P. Diddy. And what did he post? He said, if Diddy gets racketeering and sex trafficking charges for freak-offs, there will definitely be others involved. And of course, the United States Attorney said, we're not done. This investigation is ongoing. They're going after more than P. Diddy. And by the way, one of the attorneys came out because they're disgusted by what's happening. Reading from an article here on Yahoo, the arrest of music mogul Sean P. Diddy Combs is not about the 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube discovered during the March raids on his Los Angeles and Miami properties. It's about allegations of coordinated and documented physical and sexual abuse. It's not about the slickly named freak-off parties. It's about alleged systemic coercion, threats and trafficking of multiple women over many, many years. It's not even about Diddy, or at least not just Diddy. It's about the hundreds of people who enabled him, the thousands who turned a blind eye, and a culture that once again allowed the brutal treatment of women and men to remain an open secret for years, as long as the perpetrator is rich, famous, and powerful enough. But let's stop with the lube jokes. That was what a column in the Los Angeles Times articulated. Everybody's in on it. This is not going away. They're trying to find out all culprits involved. And it ain't just people who were employed under Bad Boy Entertainment or any more of Sean P. Diddy Combs' enterprises. They're trying to get everybody. You got music executives, according to the Daily Mail, you got music executives that have been put on notice to have contingency plans in case their names are implicated. This is not going away, ladies and gentlemen. This is not going away. And if you love yourself some Sean P. Diddy Combs
and guess what? A bunch of them are quitting. They gave their resignations and they are out, stage left. A lot of executives have quit. I guess maybe they're going to go into hiding, or hideaway, right? So stay tuned. More is coming.
Find yourself very, very scared for him. Consider yourself justified. There's some local police department that's coming after him. This is some officer coming after him. This is Homeland Security.
The big dog.
These crimes are federal. These are RICO charges. You've had people who've been on the record saying they'd rather be charged with murder than having RICO charges leveled against them. That's how serious this is. And Sean P. Diddy Combs was willing to post $50 million bond. And with this economy, 50. With inflation,
50,
with the government constantly looking to get their hands on our money, they said, keep your money. Nah, we ain't accepting it. Stay your ass in jail. This is not a joke.
That's crazy. $50 million. And they said no. That means they know more than they are letting us know right now. They have him by his proverbial balls. And these other people that are involved for years and that have been complicit, they are scared. I feel as if they're shivering in their boots, sweating in their palms. Maybe they're sweating inside of their shoes and socks. But heads are going to roll. Let's continue.
This is some serious, serious business. They ain't even just talking about his abuse. One of which was caught on video when he hit his ex-girlfriend or his then girlfriend, Cassie Ventura.
Wickedness.
This isn't even just about continuous physical abuse spanning years in terms of the allegations and accusations that have been thrown out about him. They're calling this a criminal enterprise, which means there's a boatload of other people involved. They're using words like prostitution, essentially implying there was a prostitution ring going on. I don't know what else to say to y'all other than we have to sit back and wait. And I pray that some of the people that I've seen over the years, some of the people he's done business with, some of the people we're fans of, I'm not going to throw any names out there, but we all know who used to work under Bad Boy Entertainment. We all know that he's been friends with everybody. We all know the kind of connections this man has. I am praying that this man doesn't find himself in a position where others are inevitably implicated. And we see some of the people we love the most, stars we revered for years, producers and executives that we've known for years, implicated in all of this. Because the federal government is coming after everybody. We got to brace ourselves, y'all. We got to brace ourselves. Coming up, I'll speak to the one and only Ryan Smith about the legal road ahead for Diddy heading into his federal trial. Legal analyst Ryan Smith does a great, great job for ESPN and ABC over the last several years. I'm honored to have him on. He's up next to break all of this down for us right here on the Stephen A. Smith Show, over the digital airways of YouTube, and of course, over iHeartRadio. Be back with more in a minute.
Which the next segment that's coming up with Ryan, you guys should pay attention. I'm watching it new with you. I have not really watched it. I skimmed through it, but I listened to about 1 minute of what Ryan was saying. And let me tell you, he is going to drop some gems. In that 1 minute I listened to, he's going to drop some gems. So I'll continue.
The NFL season is off and running, and Prize Picks has got you covered when it comes to helping you make some.
All right, guys, I'm going to fast forward just a bit, so give me a second. Let me go down to here, jump right to about here. Okay, so let me roll this.
As promised, to discuss the legal aspects of the federal indictment of Sean P. Diddy Combs is the one and only Ryan Smith, legal analyst for ESPN and ABC News, my colleague, my contemporary. What's up, my man? How are you? How's everything?
What's going on, Stephen A? Good to talk to you as always, man.
Thank you so much for making time out of your busy schedule. I really, really appreciate it. Let's get right to it. Sean Combs is charged with racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking, and interstate transportation for prostitution. The crux of the charges are tied to freak-offs, coerced sex acts that Combs allegedly orchestrated and recorded. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. The freak-offs, as the prosecution said in the bail hearing, the freak-offs are the core of this case. It all kind of revolves around that. And the idea behind this, you talk about racketeering conspiracy, Stephen A., that's the big one. That's the one, and you talk about the penalties here, minimum 15 years, maximum life in prison. But the racketeering conspiracy is the big one because it involves Sean Combs setting up business enterprises to be a record executive, to build a media empire, but also, the allegations say, conspiring with others to get together and set up a criminal enterprise, to commit criminal acts, and then to commit other acts to cover up some of those acts, all in furtherance of satisfying his sexual desires. So the charges you have are spot on, and these are serious charges, very hard to beat for a defense.
Is this an embellished way, Ryan, of saying that he basically tried to have his own prostitution ring?
That's one way to put it. You know, it's almost a way of saying he controlled this almost like a mobster controls certain criminal organizations. The allegations here, and when you talk about RICO, it's first started because of mob activity. You couldn't necessarily say someone did something directly, but you can say people got together, set up an enterprise, and decided to carry out criminal acts. So it's almost like, yes, a prosecution ring, but more to facilitate these freak-offs, according to the allegations. And Stephen A., it's important to say these are all allegations at this point. The federal government has put together a case. They've compiled what they say is mountains of evidence. And so this will all have to be proven in court.
Mm-hmm.
What, have you ever seen anybody, a court system, turn down $50 million bond? I heard $50 million. He's offering them $50 million to get off, to, let him out of jail, let him go to home confinement and detainment, promising, according to TMZ anyway, that he wasn't going to be near any women or anything like that. And they still said, hell no, stay your behind in jail as of Tuesday afternoon. Do you find that to be a tad bit odd?
Not at all, not considering the nature of the crimes. Because when you look about bail, right, Stephen A., it's not just about, well, can I sit at home? I'll be fine. I won't leave. His defense lawyer putting up, hey, Sam, we're going to put up $50 million bond, showing passports in the bail hearing. I've got his passport, his children's passports. He's not going anywhere. But when you talk about giving bail, there's a couple of factors involved: the dangerousness of the individual, the flight risk involved potentially, and the nature of the crimes. Dangerousness. These are harsh allegations: kidnapping, forced sex, coercion, bribery, kidnapping, arson. That's just some of what they're alleging in this complaint. Flight risk. You're talking about a billionaire, Stephen A. He's saying, I'll give up my house. The prosecution looks at that and says, well, look, you have so many resources, you could find a number of ways of getting out of town. And not only that, the judge in this case, in denying bail, talked about how a lot of these activities happen behind closed doors and happened when he was under the influence of substances, according to the allegations. So it seems like the judge was looking at this and saying, if I did let you off and stay at home, you could commit the very crimes that prosecutors are alleging. And that's the last thing I want to happen, no matter how much money you're saying you'll offer.
Is that based strictly on the prosecution's assertions, or is it about witnesses who've already publicly proclaimed that he's engaged in this behavior? And even though they didn't necessarily do it this past Tuesday, the noise reverberating around this country about him and the kind of acts that he's alleged to have committed, and along with the video of him hitting and kicking Cassie Ventura a few months ago. How much of a role did that play in your estimation in the judge denying him bail on Tuesday?
Denying bail on Tuesday, I think it played a role because it's the basis of the indictment in some ways. So the idea is this is the situation that happened with Cassie that you're putting up right there right now, at least according to what we can surmise from the indictment. That's part of this. That's part of what they're considered to be these freak-offs. That's part of some of the alleged conduct they're saying that Diddy did. And so the judge, in looking at that and tying all this together in the indictment, says, hey, these kinds of things could happen. Maybe not the behavior you're seeing on the video there, but in terms of what prosecutors are alleging. Now, if you talk about the larger picture here, when you talk about the freak-offs, this overall behavior, the judge looks at that and looks at what's out there. And the last thing they want to do is say, I let somebody out on bail, they provided the money, and then they did the same conduct, the very same conduct that's being alleged here. We find out that later. In a sense, trying to protect the public from what could be a dangerous individual. So did it have an impact? Yes, in the sense of what the prosecutors are saying P. Diddy did in this entire criminal enterprise as they allege it.
Interested in knowing what you think about the arguments that P. Diddy tried to make in his own defense through his lawyer, of course, on Tuesday. I saw his lawyer appear, one of his lawyers appear on Cuomo on News Nation. And when she was talking to Chris Cuomo, she articulated that the difference, people have brought up R. Kelly, they brought up stuff like that. And they were like, you're talking about underage people there. In this particular instance, they're saying you might abhor P. Diddy's behavior, but nevertheless, it involved consenting adults. That is the argument that they were trying to make. How plausible of an argument is that at this particular moment in time?
Stephen A., this is a tough case to beat, but I will say this. What you're articulating right now is the defense strategy to a T. Think about it this way. They look at this situation and they say, this entire case for them, the defense, is based on Cassie's allegations. And what that really is for the defense, at least according to what we've heard from them so far, is a relationship gone bad, gone very bad. And it's important to note, when you look at the defense argument here, there are bad people who do very bad things. But just because they do bad things doesn't mean those are criminally bad things. That's sort of the angle they're taking there. Even when they talk about the Cassie video in the detention hearing, they talked about the precursor to that being an argument over stuff that was on his cell phone about communicating to other women. They've talked about Diddy being an imperfect person. They've talked about the freak-offs being adults doing adult things. When looked at that way, it's like they're trying to paint Stephen A. a picture of a bunch of people got together, had a party, and there was sex. That's not illegal. A bunch of people got together and had a party, and there was crazy sex. That's not illegal. They're trying to paint it as if the activities that people are saying Diddy did are not criminal acts. They might be untoward. People might think they're freaky. People might not like him. People might think he's a bad person. But for them, being a bad person does not mean being criminally liable.
One can argue, you look at Bill Cosby and what happened to him, albeit years later. You look at Jeffrey Epstein. You look at Harvey Weinstein. You look at R. Kelly. Because you have those specific incidences to point to in recent memory, that would dilute the potency of such an argument on the part of the defense. Do you agree with such an assertion?
I do, personally, because we've now seen, and frankly, we've known in some ways, many people in the public and just in the way you look at life, we have known about the issue of power imbalance in our society on jobs in different occasions. Many people, many of your listeners have probably experienced it on many occasions. And what we've seen to the Epstein case, the R. Kelly case, is that there are situations that the rich and powerful can put other people in that can coerce them, force them to do things against their will, even force them in criminal ways, but they can do it because of their power dynamic. So getting back to your point, this idea of, hey, these are consenting individuals doing consenting things. Diddy's relationship with victim one in the indictment, which many people are saying is Cassie in this case, it's consenting activity. But looked at another way, especially through the lens of what we've seen recently with Epstein, with Bill Cosby, with R. Kelly, we now know that there are things that are going on with powerful individuals that may be criminal acts, but they're doing it because they have the power over others. They're doing it because they can. They're doing it because they're holding threats. Some of these allegations are you put somebody up in a hotel somewhere to live, and then you threaten to take it away unless they participate in freak-offs. You kidnap them. You commit arson in other cases, bribery. So many different things that they're alleging here that a criminal enterprise, in their mind, a criminal enterprise has done in order to facilitate these criminal acts. So for me, the argument falls short. But here's the thing, Stephen A. Everything changes when you're in a courtroom. And if the defense, what they're going to try to do is convince a jury of, hey, you may hate P. Diddy, may hate everything about him. You may think he uses his power for wrong means, but in a criminal way, is that what he's doing? And they're going to try to poke holes in that.
Just a few more questions before I let you get on out of here. Ryan Smith, legal analyst for ESPN and ABC News, right here with Stephen A. Smith on the Stephen A. Smith Show. P. Diddy's faced a wave of lawsuits, one as recent as last week accusing him of sexual assault and misconduct in the past year. Of course, he's denied wrongdoing. How many lawsuits has he settled at this point? Are you aware of that number?
So far, not aware of the specific number, but it's been more than a few. And here's the thing. When you think about that, I know a lot of people see that, and technically, and this is one of the mountains of problems for the defense, people hear that he settled a lawsuit and say, he must have done something. He must have done something. Doing something does not mean guilty of RICO conspiracy. Doing something does not mean guilty of sexual trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, or transportation for engagement in prostitution. Those are the charges he's facing in the federal indictment. So that's going to be important here because, yes, they will have, and already you can see, Stephen A., the mountain of evidence that prosecutors are compiling. In their detention letter, they talked about over 50 witnesses and victims that they've talked to, over 100 electronic devices, securing from his property over 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricants. This is what they're all trying to do to build out this idea that these freak-offs happened and that he violated the law in this way and faces severe penalties for it.
What will happen to his assets? Answer me that question, because he put up $50 million. They didn't accept it. But what's scheduled to happen to his assets right now?
Yeah, if he's convicted. So if he's convicted, one of the things they're asking for in here is forfeiture of assets. And look, Stephen A., that could mean his businesses, bad boy, houses, cars, planes, all these different assets he has. We don't know the amount to the extent of what would happen here. That's going to be up to the judge, again, if convicted. But that's what could happen. Right now, it's all a waiting game. We wait for the trial. They have to go through the discovery, and that could be months and months and months away. So for now, those assets might be generally fine, but all bets are off if he's convicted based on what happens.
Kevin Lyles, CEO of 300 Entertainment, announced that he'll step down at the end of September. He announced that Tuesday. He's been with Warner Music Group since 2004, which formerly housed Diddy's Bad Boy Records, and has been a vocal defender of Puffy. What are we to make of the announcement on the day of the indictment that something like that happened, that he decided to step down?
Yeah, it's a tough one because you look at this, Stephen A., and I guess on one side you could say, well, is there some sort of involvement with Kevin Lyles in this? But again, I put my legal hat on and I say, we can't know that for sure. All of this is, even with P. Diddy, it's innocent until proven guilty. I always want to say that in a case like this because the allegations are so explosive. But when you talk about other individuals involved, think about what is alleged here in the indictment. It's not just Diddy committed a crime. Racketeering conspiracy is you had a meeting of the minds with another person, a group of individuals to set up a criminal enterprise and do criminal acts. I am not saying that Lyles or anyone else that might have been identified or that people are thinking of had anything to do with that. But I think one of the problems with people involved in Diddy's life is that they are now wrapped in some way in this. They might be in some way questioned about whether or not they have some involvement, or questioned about what they knew, or questioned about what they knew about his activities. So it becomes tough to say that the two are related. We just don't know for sure. But this is the problem of being in Diddy's orbit at this point in time with these charges. One thing I think all the people who are involved in his orbit in some way or another as employees, if they haven't already been talked to, they must be thinking, I wonder if they're looking for me next. I wonder if they want to ask what I know. And that puts you in a really delicate spot.
Very last question here, Ryan. You know, Suge Knight had indicated during an interview months ago that Diddy's in a world of trouble because of who he is, who he knows, who he's connected to, and how there might be something to be concerned about. And he alluded to Jeffrey Epstein and how ultimately he had committed reportedly suicide in 2019. I remember the two cameras near the jail cell. There was something wrong with it, and there was no video of the suicide, et cetera, et cetera. So you have a lot of conspiracy theorists out there that were saying he was taken out because of who he knew and who he could implicate, et cetera, et cetera.
He was 100% taken out. 100%. That's hard to believe that he wasn't. Cameras, security, guards, and he just took himself out, and they had nothing was alerting them, no sounds, anything like. I'm kind of like choked up about just wrapping my head around it because I'm still trying to figure that out. So it's hard to grapple for the words to say how did all of this happen with Jeffrey Epstein, and no one can have any account of what took place prior or during this part of his demise. Something is just odd.
And Suge Knight referred to that. Usually you're not trying to use Suge Knight as a source, but when you talk about the music industry and some of the stuff that goes on in the music industry, if anybody would know, it would be him. Is that real or fantasized in your eyes as it pertains to the kind of concerns that somebody in P. Diddy's position should have at this moment in time?
You mean that others might be wrapped into this outside of you, and that other people bigger than him might be wrapped into this?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. I think that might have something to do with them saying, no, we're not granting you bail. We're going to keep you right here. You know, I think that when you have the Homeland Security, and again, I don't know, but my attitude, Ryan, is this. If Homeland Security is coming your way, chances are they ain't just coming for you. They're coming for more than just you. That's how I'm thinking. I could be wrong. You would know better than me. That's why I'm asking.
I'll tell you, it's an interesting point because you almost look at it like this. There's two ways to look at somebody in a situation like this when you have a P. Diddy. First of all, you can look at it the one way and say, what bigger fish is there than him? So, because he's a big enough fish in and of himself. This is a man whose assets some estimate to be in the billion range, the companies, all the different things that he's got. So he's a big figure in the industry. But I mentioned two ways to look at it. One way you look at these charges is the prosecutor's office, the SDN, the Southern District of New York is making a statement. We are not going to tolerate this kind of conduct. So if you are involved under Diddy, around Diddy, we will hold you accountable. They have said, Stephen A., they are not done. That's what's really interesting in this. They are not done. They might be doing more. Even in the detention letter they sent, they said they're not revealing everything right now. So there's more out there that we don't know. Now, to your point, someone higher, what you do in a lot of these cases is if you've got somebody charged with a crime, you might step back and say, okay, who do you know above you? What information are you willing to give on to this person? And you talk about the severity of these charges. Think about it. Life in prison as a maximum, that could be used to get Diddy to comply if you think there's something to this, if the defense thinks there's something to this, to maybe flip on somebody else. So we're talking about theory. We're not talking about fact. But in some ways, I think you've got a point. You're not only sending the message of anybody in the orbit, you could be held accountable in some way if you don't come forward with the information you know, or to somebody like Diddy, hey, if you know others in different situations, tell us what you know, and maybe that changes your picture. I'm not saying it's fact. I'm saying it's always a possibility when you're looking at a case like this.
One of the very best in the business, legal analyst extraordinaire for ESPN and ABC News, the one and only Ryan Smith, right here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Thank you so much for your time, my man, and the education. Much, much appreciated, man. Thank you so much.
Anytime, man. Take care.
That's a lot to think about right there. Ain't no doubt. That's a lot to think about right there. Ryan dropped some info on that, on all of us. I hope y'all caught it. I hope y'all got it. Just even more reasons, not less. Even more reasons for P. Diddy to be concerned. I'll get into all of that just a little bit more and touch on it before I close out the show today. But not before I talk about a colleague of mine who's decided, shockingly I might add, to step away from the business. One of the very, very best to ever do it. He's walking away. I'll bring that up and tell you who I'm talking about in a minute. You're watching the Stephen A. Smith Show over the digital airways on YouTube and listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show over iHeartRadio. Back with my closing remarks and my comments about a colleague in a minute. Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show right here over the digital airways of YouTube and, of course, iHeartRadio. Ryan Smith was excellent. Make no mistake about it. He is a legal analyst for ABC News and ESPN for a reason. The brother knows what he's talking about. He's right on top of it. And he gave us cause to pause and contemplate a few things. The fact that why the courts initially turned down a $50 million bond, some of the allegations that have been thrown against him. I'm just looking right here at a report. I mean, we've got stuff with P. Diddy dating back to 1999. Arrested on felony charges in a nightclub shooting. Reached a settlement after he and an executive allegedly beat up Interscope Records executive Steve Stout. December of 1999 was involved in a club shooting when he was with his then girlfriend, the one and only Jennifer Lopez, and gunshots were fired and stuff like that. A woman by the name of Natanya Rubin, who was at the club that night, said she saw Combs shoot her in the face. She filed a $130 million lawsuit against him in 2008, which was settled in 2011. There's one in June of 2004 where fashion designer Kimora Lee Simmons, Russell Simmons' ex-wife, said in a New York Magazine interview that, quote, she said something to Combs and he threatened to hit her while she was pregnant. Combs eventually got down on his knees in public to apologize. February 2024, Combs allegedly threatened to blow up rapper Kid Cudi's car after he learned the rapper was romantically interested in his ex-girlfriend, R&B singer Cassandra Cassie Ventura. Kid Cudi's car exploded in his driveway around the same time, according to a lawsuit later filed by Ventura. Cudi told the New York Times the story was true. June of 2019, some ex spoke against him, swearing he abused her during their 5-year relationship. December 2022, Aubrey O'Day, you heard what she had to say. during a podcast, Call Her Daddy, said Combs fired her from the band because she, quote, wasn't willing to do what was expected of her, not talent-wise, but in other areas. Another lawsuit, first filed against Diddy by Cassie Ventura. She sued Combs, alleging in New York federal court that he brought her into his ostentatious, fast-paced, and drug-fueled lifestyle when she was just 19 and he was 37 years of age. We know what's come of that because we saw the video. I'm just looking at all of this. It's a pattern. That's what they're trying to say. I'm not sitting up there and putting this business out on Front Street. It's already been out on Front Street. And in the end, what it comes down to is the fact that there's a litany of allegations.
His business is not just on Front Street. It's on the superhighway. It's on the superhighway. Let's see when it crashes, how many people are going to be in the car with him? How many people are going to get injured with him? But it's coming. Let's see. Stay tight. Stay put. More is to come.
Against him that he's going to have to answer for because they're going to use all of this against him. And when I asked Ryan Smith about Jeffrey Epstein and bringing out things analogous to that, yes, it was a hypothetical question on my part. Why do I ask that? Because guess what, ladies and gentlemen? I'm a Law and Order fanatic. I loved Matlock. I loved Perry Mason. I loved Columbo. I loved all of those shows, okay? And you see people engaging in hypotheticals all the time. Theories being thrown in front of the courts to explain what actions have taken place and why they may have done so. All of these things. So I had no problem asking Ryan Smith that question, but being an astute professional that he is, he answered it. He didn't engage in hypotheticals. He stuck to the facts. More power to him. In the end, when it comes...
Usually hypotheticals always get us in trouble. Hypotheticals. People ask these erroneous hypothetical questions and expect for you to give them a factual answer. And they're really serious. They ask a hypothetical question and they don't let you know that it's hypothetical. They'll just ask the question and it's, that doesn't sound, something's kind of off. And it was like, answer the question. I'm like, something is off. Is that a real question? Is that a hypothetical question? Or is just some information you're trying to get out of me? When I'm going to ask a person a hypothetical question, I let them know it's a hypothetical question. I don't operate or phrase it or come off like it's a real, legitimate question, because you can't speak in hyperboles. You can't. It throws people for a loop. All right, let's continue.
Comes down to is this. We're going to see what happens moving forward. But the reason why I'm paying so much attention to this story, Sean P. Diddy Combs' case is one thing. Who they're trying to squeeze him to implement may be another. We're not saying definitively that that's what the courts are doing and that's what the federal government is doing in pushing this case against them. I'm saying in all likelihood it is a possibility. And this man is facing potentially life in prison, in a federal prison. One would surmise that if you have some information to offer about other folks, to incriminate them, to make things lighter for you, things could get very, very interesting. As I reported earlier, the Daily Mail says several executives, at least 5 in the industry, were informed to engage in contingency planning in case they're implicated in any way, because shareholders and what have you for their respective companies are not going to protect them. That's according to the Daily Mail. We heard what 50 Cent had to say. We heard what Aubrey O'Day had to say. We heard what Foxy Brown had to say. This is bad. It's very bad. I don't know what else to say. So I'm just going to leave it at that on that particular subject. But before I go, I want to give a quick shout out to a friend and former ESPN colleague.
All right, guys. So I'm going to wrap up right here. And close this one out. But remember, it's always important to be very upfront and honest. And when a person operate in the dark for a long time, at some point the light comes on. At some point the light comes on. It's kind of like, have you ever seen cockroaches or roaches trying to hide in a corner, or maybe uh, maybe a fly on the wall, and you get close and the fly flies away, or you turn the lights on and the roaches run away. That's kind of like what they are right now. Roaches trying to hide in the corner, and now the light is on, and now they're all scattering, trying to take cover, right? All of these people are cockroaches. They've been doing this for such a long time in the dark. Now the light is turned on and the glare is coming their way. So they can do one or two things. They can stand there like a deer with the headlights and scared and don't know what to do, or they can try to make some kind of assessment and come to terms of what's coming next for them, because it's coming, right? The only way that they don't get their just due is because Diddy end up in the way of Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein. Hope not, but the probability is quite high, quite high. So, on that note, with that being said, I'm going to wrap it up here. And before I go, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you catch this at a later time, I appreciate you for watching. But I like to say, remember to question everything, because if you don't, you could fall for anything, or you may or will fall for anything. So on that note, guys, thank you again. Thank you for watching. And remember to like, share, subscribe. Hey, we need those numbers here. Stop playing. All right. Thank you.